Is this another sign that house prices are going to drop? Now, depending on where you are, house prices already have been dropping, or they're just beginning to get price cuts because of a rise in inventory that's been coming on the market. And again, this is real estate's local, so this is dependent on where you live, right? If you're in Florida, like where I'm at, inventory has spiked like crazy. House prices have been dropping for the past 2 years at least, and we're down like 30%, 40%, depending on where you are. Lumber prices have tumbled this month. Lumber dropping. Could this also have to do with tariffs? These are all possibilities, but how is this going to affect the housing market? Lumber prices have tumbled this month. Lumber futures have dropped about 12% since hitting a 3-year high. Okay, so we hit a high here, is what they're saying. Okay, I mean, if you can read a chart, this is still within a trend line. So until we really start breaking down, and even breaking here, we're not really breaking down yet. Still, after hitting a high, if we're talking trading, if you hit a high, people are going to sell at a high, right? There are going to be people that sell at a high. Wood buyers stocked up before duties on Canadians 2x4s more than doubled this month, and that traders are worried about the U.S. housing market. Futures for September delivery fell to around $610 per 1,000 board feet late Friday and have declined in 9 of the past 10 trading days. And then here we have lumber is one of the most sensitive barometers of future demand because it ties directly into housing construction and credit. When it rolls over this hard, it often means something deeper. Builders pulling back, financing tightening, and consumers hesitating on big ticket commitments. We've seen such as housing, right? Housing or any type of big remodel project or additions, right, on houses, just different things like that, right? We've seen this before in 2006, 2007. Lumber collapsed long before the housing bust became obvious. In 2021-22, lumber's spike and crash captured the whiplash of pandemic stimulus meeting Fed tightening. Today's drop back under $600 is telling us not just about oversupply, but about fading demand in an economy where mortgage costs remain restrictive and liquidity is being drained. There's also a market structure angle. Commodities like lumber usually run ahead of official data. The PMI slowdown, weakening credit surveys, and leverage ETF outflows are all now echoing the same caution. Lower lumber prices might look like disinflation on paper, but if the driver is demand destruction, that's recessionary, not bullish. This is interesting because there's definitely, to some extent, demand. I mean, I don't know if I would call it destruction, but absolutely demand pullback. I think a lot of people are unsure of what's happening in many different reasons, whether it's political, whether that's because, whether they like Trump or not, or if it's because of tariffs, which we can also say is political, right? People unsure of what's going to happen with tariffs. Canada is also a source of lumber and they're hit with tariffs, right? So things like that. But also, I want to say AI and people, what's happening with people's jobs, right? Just recently, just in the past week, 2 weeks, the revision of the jobs numbers. I think that people are a little bit weird about that. Even where I'm at here in Florida, a lot of the places that I go to saying that, like, right, we're in off season right now. And a lot of the places that I'm going to, staff, people are saying that season wasn't that great for them. That's a pullback in tourism for Florida. People not traveling as much. People not going out, spending their money, right? People being a bit more conservative. That has to do with demand, maybe not demand destruction, but certainly demand pullback. People being a bit more conservative, a bit more careful, no clear direction, things like that. Like, okay, where do we put our money? Where do we spend? Where do we not spend? Where do we save? What's going on with housing? Especially here in Florida, housing supply has been going higher the past couple of years. Building starts have been crazy. But now they're starting to pull back because builders aren't able to sell them. And they're having to take haircuts on sales prices. They're having to give more concessions, do more rate buy downs in order to move product. That's for all kinds of reasons. Also, all this stuff is cyclical. So it's in a lot of ways, not to diminish it, but just where we are in the cycle. 5 years ago, the whole place was upended and things like housing was on steroids. There's going to be some amount of resetting that happens after that. And I think we're just living through that and have been for the past couple of years. We're just seeing where things are going to settle. I mean, maybe if they settle at all, if they settle at all, some people would think that this is this is potentially a lot of chaos. Here we see lumber prices coming down. This here implies lower prices even with this gap fill. We're talking about chart reading here. But even with this gap fill, this right here, bear flag, indicates lower prices. Do they go lower? Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't. Maybe they bounce back here. Maybe they just go sideways for a while. That's very possible. Sideways for a while. But again, maybe they go sideways for a little while before they drop back down. I wish that it showed volume on here. That would also be a big tell. If this is coming down on a lot of volume, it's just other things to know about it. All right, here's Grok. Lumber future prices dropped sharply in August 2025 after a July spike, likely due to weakened housing demand from high interest rates, economic uncertainty, and oversupply from mills. Okay, that's no different than the oversupply of housing in Florida, where there's just the constant building, and then everybody that already owns a house that's putting it up on the market for whatever reason, whether it's their insurance and taxes went up so high that the holding costs don't make any sense for them to have a second house anymore, right? Or their primary and they just want to get out of it and move to somewhere cheaper. Things like that. This, right? Recent U.S. tariff hikes on Canadian imports to 35%. Added volatility. I mean, that's a big deal. But spot prices have edged up slightly. So I think that it's a lot of these kind of growing pains, if you will. But certainly weakened housing demand from all this stuff, this economic uncertainty. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The only thing in here that I didn't specifically know about was this oversupply from mills. You know, if you make too much of a thing, if there's supply and demand is supply and demand. If there's no demand for it, prices are going to drop until it meets demand and then it stabilizes. This is just another indicator of potential lower housing prices. Housing prices coming in. And how I see it is, again, in Florida, housing prices have been coming down. They have been. But I'm starting to see it in other areas in the country, right? Whether that's in Los Angeles or Southern California. Obviously, spots like Arizona and Texas have been softer, right? Phoenix, especially, a lot softer. Vegas, different areas that had big run-ups, but especially in places like Arizona, Texas, Florida, right? Idaho. These places had oversized run-ups the past 5 years. And now the past 2 years, it's all starting to kind of come back down. It's going to find its footing and then go from there. We're still finding footing. That's what it feels like. It feels like we're still finding footing for where housing prices really should be in today's world. So there it is. What do you think about lumber prices coming down? Yeah, look at this. This is great because this gives us a bit more history. This is all still within trend. I mean, we're breaking the 200. That's not great. But it's broken the 200 over here and come back. So that could happen. Or it could be more like this. right? We come back, retest the 200, and then come right back down, just like this. But the 200 is still trending up. So I think that lumber, looking at it from this chart, just from chart reading perspective, lumber still has fight in it. That's what it looks like to me. RSI is down. That's not to say it can't stay down. These are lagging indicators. But that's what this chart is telling me. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about this? Is this future pain for housing prices?